Hi, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome everybody here and anybody watching at home. We welcome you to our meeting today. It is with great pleasure and privilege on this Thursday afternoon. The time is now 1:31, September 7th, 2017. I call this meeting to order. We'll start with an invocation by Father Julian from Our Lady of Guadalupe Church, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Miss Diana.
Good afternoon. Let us begin in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Father God, we come before you and we give you thanks for the opportunity that you give us, Father, to be servant leaders. We ask that you continue to send your Spirit upon all of us who are called upon, who are given the privilege to be those hands, the feet of Christ. We ask that you give us the compassion, that you give us the knowledge, the wisdom, but most of all, Father God, that you give us the heart of servants, that as we come together, Father God, to do what is best for the community, that we may be aware that this is an awesome responsibility and a privilege that you have given us. We ask, especially for the council, that you give them the ability to see clearly your will in all things, that they may clear away from anything that distracts them from doing what they are called to do for the good of the community. And we ask all of this through the precious blood and the divine name of Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Please turn and face the flag. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, at this time, agenda item number 2, citizen comments and public announcements. Keep in mind any citizen who has a request for city services or other items of concern which cannot be approved or otherwise resolved by the city manager may choose to address the council. Citizens who wish to address the city council about items on the agenda will have 3 minutes to express their position. Please indicate agenda item number on which you wish to comment. And remember, all presentations and discussions should be directed to the City Council and all questions to the Mayor. Any complaints and/or discussion about individuals, personnel, council members, city staff, or other persons would be out of order and will not be heard by the City Council at this time. Charges or complaints about specific individuals shall be presented in writing to the City Manager. All complaints of this nature must be signed and dated by the individual filing the complaint and will be addressed pursuant to the Alice personnel policies. Please approach the speaker stand, state your full name and address when you begin your remarks, and that will begin the official minutes of 3 minutes, and that to record your appearance before the City Council. If you have written notes, please present them to the Mayor and the Council and furnish an extra copy to the City Clerk. Although Council cannot take specific action on citizen comments, topics due to legal requirements, they will hear the topic, and Council may have the item placed on a future agenda for action, or refer the item to a board, commission, or committee, or refer the item to staff for study or conclusion. Thank you for your cooperation. At this time, we'll listen to citizen comments, but keep in mind that citizen comments will be different than the public hearing. So if you're wanting to speak on the budget, then that'll be agenda item number 3. So I know I have 2, but I'm not sure if these 2 want to speak during public hearing. So if it's a citizen comment, I'll take Mr. Newell Atkinson. Wait for budget? Yes, sir. Okay, Mr. Enrique Saenz, if it's a citizen comment.
Yes, ma'am, it's just about one of your items.
Okay.
Hello, Council, Mayor. My name is Enrique Saenz. I'm the president for the Alice Police Officers Association. I've been before the council before on several different things, but it's a couple of times it's been about rumors. Today, the rumor was about the retirement, everything we've been hearing, and I found it on the agenda today. So I just wanted to address that issue, and I understand the financial crisis the city is in. I completely understand it. We've done bargaining with the city and been fully abreast of the situation. I don't know what the rumors, if they're true or not, but the consideration, I'm hoping y'all will really take it into consideration, the long-range damage it could do to the city of of Alice employees. As the city of Alice in whole, we are in a budget crisis. I understand that, but at the same time, the city employees are the city of Alice. And we represent them on a daily basis in whatever aspect, whether it be in uniform as police, fire, or whether it be streets, parks, whatever it may be. We've been taking the load before on budget cuts, some larger than others. We've all had to suffer some financial cuts because of this budget crisis. When it comes up time for y'all to consider whatever, like I said, I don't know what the rumors are, but I hear different things. When it comes time for y'all to consider whatever y'all decide on the retirement system, I hope y'all really look at the long-range effects it'll have on the pool of the city employees. I could stand to lose a lot of employees with a lot of experience and a lot of time here over this issue. So I hope y'all take that into consideration whenever it comes time for that decision. I thank y'all for your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. No other comments? Public announcements? Ms. Moran, do you have any public announcements?
No, I don't have any.
Okay. Mr. Crisp?
Yeah, I just got a couple things. I just wanted to thank everybody real quick that came out and helped out at the Recycle Center over the weekend, last weekend, over the weekend. We, as a city, could not have set a goal in this, but we reached one. We reached a logistical goal where we just couldn't handle anything else, and it's amazing to know that the community cares and that we had a good number of people out there that cared and came in and helped. So I'd like to thank everybody for that. I'd also like to ask people for their continued prayers for our surrounding communities, for Houston and, you know, the communities that have been hit by Harvey, and start praying for those that are about to be impacted by Irma. We have a big one coming again, and you know, some of our efforts may be able to be used moving that way. So that'd be a great thing. Then lastly, I just want to apologize to some of the citizens out there because of the timing of this meeting. We are holding it in the day, and I know a lot of people are working. However, you need to know, and we made this apparent, I think all of us agree, that just because this meeting is happening right now doesn't mean you can't come to us at any time. We all make ourselves available just about in any way possible to talk to us about your concerns about the budget and the moves that we're going to be making and that need to be made. So this isn't it just because we have one meeting here. We're always available. I think all the ladies would agree with me on that. The CM and our financial staff, they all agree with that. So keep it coming if you do have questions. We have time still. So.
Thank you, Mr. Crisp. Ms. Garza?
No.
Ms. Carrasco? Okay. And at this time, I would just like to clarify, Ms. Lopez, can you clarify as to why the 1:30 time for citizens that were concerned?
Yes, ma'am. On the public hearing, I know there has been a lot of talk in the community. So on August 2nd, when the budget was presented, we needed to set and fix the time and place for the public hearing. We had originally planned for that to be done at a regular meeting time, which would have been Thursday, the 24th at 6:30. We also chose an alternate date of today at 1:30 in the event that a quorum could not be present. As you all recall, on that Thursday is when we were right in the midst of preparations for the hurricane. We could not hold the meeting. The notifications in the newspaper causing public, listing out the public hearing are in your packets. It was listed as August 23rd with the alternate date of September 7th at 1:30. It was published on August the 9th and again on August 18th.
Thank you, Ms. Lopez. Just a clarification, because I know a few people were upset about the time. And this was set back when. Okay. Moving on to agenda item number 3. Conduct a public hearing on the fiscal year 2016-2017 revised budget and fiscal year 2017-2018 proposed budget. So at this time, we will listen to our public on this agenda item. Mr. Atkinson, would you like to?
Very much. I'm Neil Atkinson, a taxpayer here in Alice. First, I'd really like to commend the council and the staff for the amount of time that they've taken to go over this budget line item by line item. That's something I would have liked to seen previous councils do, but they chose not to, and y'all have chose to. Now, what the results of that is, I have no idea, but at least you're trying to look at it. Number two, I'd also like to commend the council for having a record vote early on that they would not increase the tax rate. And that gave y'all a goal to work on, and hopefully that took out any possibilities of raising the taxes again over the 95% that the other council raised. Now, on the other side of the coin, I'd like to criticize a little bit about the budget. The expenses in the proposed budget for the utility and solid waste funds have been, I'm going to say, grossly overstated, resulted in lower profits to those particular funds. And that's due to the $2 million or $1.2 million or whatever you're going to do that you're stealing out of the utility and the solid waste funds to supplement the rotten shape that the general fund's in. And I understand why you're doing it, but basically that's deceptive taxation. When you have a enterprise fund that's making more than it costs to deliver that fund, like water, for instance, and then you take the extra money out and supplement the general fund, that's deceptive taxation. But I understand why you're doing it, and I would probably, in the circumstance y'all are in, I'd probably do the same thing. On the other side, with the MUC fund, the expenses have been understated, and projected income is overstated, resulting in a fake budget. The general fund reserves, about 2 years ago, we had 7 months of the reserves in the general fund, and now we have less than 2 months reserves. Basically, therefore, the required general fund expenses have not been, the amount of expenses need to be cut in the general fund, you ain't got there yet. I needed to cut a couple of $1 million, and nobody knows how much y'all have cut, if you've cut anything. I don't know. I mean, you have gone over all the expenses, but, and I haven't watched each tape, for 5 or 6 hours, and, so I don't know what you've cut. Maybe y'all have already cut a couple of $1 million out. I don't think so. But anyway, it didn't get enough cuts. And that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Noel. Okay. Are there any other citizens who would like to step up to the podium and speak on the budget? No? Okay, so at this time, we'll close our public hearing and move on to agenda item number 4. Here, presentation from Dr. Alma Charles, Superintendent of Schools, Alice Independent School District, regarding a special election for Alice Independent School District to be held on November 7th, 2017, to ratify the tax rate adopted for the 2017-2018 school year. Hi, Dr.
Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon.
With me, I have Ludi Cancino. She's our CFO, and I also have Anna Holmgreen, who's our Assistant Superintendent. So if anyone has questions afterwards, we'll be glad to answer them. And Ludi and I will be teaming up with a presentation. So,
Dr. Charles, if you give us just one moment,
Sure,
we'll get you
not a
guys
problem.
situated. No thumb drive. Are you just going to walk through the handouts?
we emailed it. Were they?
Yeah, I printed out.
We have a handout.
You have a handout?
We didn't realize that we needed to
Okay.
put it on the thumb drive. Council, in your packets, you will find the handouts that she's going to walk through, which is essentially the PowerPoint presentation.
She just
Sorry.
handed it to us.
It's- yeah.
Oh, it's this one here.
It's this little packet that she just handed to us.
Should look like this.
Got 'em?
Yes.
Good. So again, we are looking at a tax ratification election for Tuesday, November the 7th, 2017. So what exactly is a tax ratification election, which is sometimes referred to as a TRE? The district is proposing a restructure of the tax rate that funds our schools. Voters are asked to authorize the proposed tax rate in order to move the funds from one account to the other. So TRE will maximize state aid, and there will be no increase in the total proposed tax rate. So how will the taxes be affected? The district proposes to move 6 cents from the interest and sinking fund to the maintenance and operation fund. And this will cost, again, the taxpayers no additional funds. So currently, we have a tax rate of $1.04 on the maintenance and operation and 29 cents on the interest and sinking for a total tax rate of $1.33. What we're proposing, and we have to have voters' approval to do it, is we want to move 6 cents over from one account, which is our interest and sinking, our INS, into our M&O, which is our maintenance and operation. And so it would just be moving 6 cents from one account to the other, still leaving our total tax rate at $1.33. So again, no increase to the taxpayers.
Okay, so the INS, like she mentioned, the tax rate is made up of two different tax rates. Our M&O tax rate, which is used to raise money for operations, to pay our salaries, pay utilities, to run the school district, and our INS portion of the tax rate is used to make our debt payments. So one of the questions that has been brought up before us is, how is this going to affect our INS fund? Because we are decreasing those 6 cents and moving them over to M&O. Well, it's not going to, one, we have a very healthy fund balance in our INS, but two, we are not going to use those 6 cents for operations. We are going to transfer them back to keep making our debt payments. What we are after is not the taxpayer money. It is the additional state funding that increasing the M&O rate will generate from the state. So it is an incentive for school districts to raise their tax rate. They give you more money, state money. So if we do this, they will give us an additional $750,000 just by moving the pennies over from one category to the other. And the INS will not be affected because we will transfer out those 6 pennies back to make our bond payments. So it will not affect our INS. We do have a very healthy fund balance. We have 1.8 million sitting there. And it is recommended for a district of our size that we have $885,000. So we're healthy in that fund balance. But like I said, we're not going to be spending it. We'll be moving it over. What we're after is that state money that will generate. So the projected revenue, like I mentioned before, is those $750,000. That is the first year. The second year, because of the state funding formula, it'll generate $987,000. And the year after that, it'll generate over $1 million. And that's assuming everything stays consistent. So that means that we are using the same funding formula, which changes every 2 years because we go with the state budget. So every biennium it changes. So just assuming it stays consistent and the state does not increase or decrease funding, that's the potential revenue for the next 3 years. So how are we proposing to use this money? So what we want to do is with those $750,000 that we're generating from the state, what we're proposing is to give it all back to our employees. Every single cent that we generate will be paid back. All teachers will receive a $1,500 pay increase, and all other employees $750 for a total cost of $825,000.
So again, just moving the money over. And one of the challenges that we've had is really keeping our staff. We've had a high turnover rate, and as you've heard, part of the focus is literacy at the early age. But when you see our data, our teachers stay for 2-3 years, and Anna can tell you this because she's been here the longest. We train them, and we train them really, really well, but then they leave us. So we've invested all this money in training, but in 2-3 years they leave, and they're leaving because we're not paying. Our salary was at $37,000. The board approved an increase of $38,000 for our first year, and we really kind of tried to focus on year 1 through 5. To increase those rates to try to maintain our teachers. This would increase it an additional $1,500 for our teachers. And then in addition to that, all other staff would get a $750 raise for the year. And so we're hoping to continue to increase our ability to give raises. We know that that money will stay in Alice. If we pay them, we know that they'll shop here. Most Alice folks are very true to Alice, and they stay here with us. But we want to keep the teachers so that, again, our literacy can increase, our students can read, and at the end, and it's long-term, then when we graduate students and they become citizens, they're productive citizens in our community. They've made, they've graduated and they know how to read and write, and they can go get a degree, they can make a good, wage, and they can actually contribute back to the city. So it's really a cyclical type of investment for us, but we have to try to make it, and one way to do that, as Ludi has mentioned, is by utilizing this particular opportunity to move the 6 cents over to get additional state funds. And again, this would be at no increase to the citizens.
And it will be a true pay increase. This year we will pay it as a lump sum, and then the year after it'll be added to their salary. So it is a true pay increase that'll stay on for years to come. And we hope to build on that every year.
The language on the ballot.
Oh, yes, the language on the ballot, thank you. Because it'll read very a certain way, and our citizens may not understand it, and it looks kind of deceiving, and we want to make sure that people know and understand the intent of how it's written and why it's written that way.
Okay, so on the ballot, it will read that we are increasing 6 cents, but what you don't see is the part of the INS being decreased, because the only tax rate that requires voter ratification, because it's the only one that's increasing, is the M&O side. So it'll read as approving the ad valorem tax rate of $1.33 per $100 valuation in Alice Independent School District for the current year, a rate that is 6 cents higher per $100 valuation than the school district rollback tax rate for the purposes of providing pay increases to Alice ISD staff. So in the ballot, we do mention how we're going to use that money. It's just that 6 cents make it seem like we are increasing the total tax rate. The total tax rate will be the same. So it's the M&O part that you see on the ballot.
So again, we're encouraging our citizens to go out and vote. When this is passed, then we were able to move forward with our next steps. So we just wanted to inform, obviously, the citizens, and also to answer any questions that they may have, at this time. So if we have any questions, we'll be glad to do that at this point.
Council, any questions? Ms. Moran?
I have a question, Dr. Charles.
Yes, ma'am.
So basically, you're transferring from the INS into the M&O. Now, the $750,000, is that monies that's going to be generated from doing that, or is that monies that the state is actually giving you?
The state actually gives it to
Okay.
you.
But based on their funding formula, they have and it's a very, very complicated funding formula, but somewhere in there, they take into consideration how much you tax. So the maximum that we can tax is $1.17. We're not asking for the maximum, we're going to $1.10. But for you to, they reward you for putting forth tax effort into collecting more taxes. Even though we're not, because we're not gonna use them at all, we're gonna transfer them over, but it reads at $1.10, so that'll generate extra funding from them. So it'll be state money.
Well, I want to commend you, Dr. Charles, and your staff for putting this PowerPoint together. I wish, we could have shown it.
I apologize.
So,
We
the public
have
could
it,
see
we have it on our website, so.
And if you want, we
Yes.
can maybe put it on our
Five.
cable, Channel 5.
That would be
if you'll
perfect.
send
I
it.
appreciate that very much.
And I really appreciate how you simplified this. It's so easy to understand. So kudos to your staff. And I'm just wondering why something like this hadn't been done before, or has it?
Not that I'm aware of. We thought that the timing was perfect
Yes,
to do it. I think we've had 2 years of, we kind of all been on the same boat here. 2 years of hardship. The district
Exactly.
had a very healthy fund balance, and we've been able to withstand all the property loss. And we've been able to maintain still a very healthy fund balance. We ended last year with $10 million, almost $11 million, excuse me. We anticipate
still having above the 3-month average that TA recommends. So we, because I think we've hopefully flatlined with our property values, so we're hoping that this year we're stable. We adopted still a deficit, but it's a lot better looking than we have in previous years. I think from here we'll start going up though.
I have been told that in terms of sales tax, seems to be a trend that they are increasing. I believe, given the economic downturn that the city of Alice has faced and the school and county, this is a year where we've seen some very creative and innovative ways to not only address our budget, but to address our citizens, our teachers, our staff. And I think you're going to see that from the city as well. So thank you so much. I appreciate the presentation.
Thank you for your support.
And good luck to you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Marin. Mr. Crisp, any questions?
Yeah, I do, real quick. So the 750 is going to come from the state?
Yes.
Now, the additional revenue that's going into M&O from the 6 cents, that's going to be able to be used, or is that it's going to go back?
It goes back to pay our debt.
Okay, so you're just going to end up transferring it back over?
yes.
Okay.
The big difference is that once I tax on the INS side, it stays on INS. I cannot use it for anything else other than making my bond payments. But if I tax it at M&O, I can send it back to INS,
Yes.
where I can't do the opposite. So that's what we're doing. We're sending it back.
So you're just going to,
Yes.
Okay.
So our INS fund will be fine.
I have a question, Ms. Charles, how many new teachers do you have?
New,
I think at staff development, we had somewhere between 60 and 70
I
new
was gonna say
teachers.
about 70.
New teachers?
Brand new.
That doesn't mean zero experience, it just means new hires to the
Yeah.
district. this
Right.
year.
wow.
Very good.
Good.
But we do have a percentage that are brand new. So again, that investment in the training,
Yes,
so if we can keep them, that would be awesome.
very good. Ms. Garza, any other questions?
The only thing is you have a good principal at the high school.
Yes, yes, Dr. Cantu is there.
Mhm.
Very good.
So we're really, really
Great,
thrilled.
he's great.
Yes, he is. Yes, he
Mhm.
is.
Ms. Carrasco, any questions? Very good, and I just want to commend y'all. That's awesome. Because we have been in a little hole as a teacher myself through education. Alice has always been in this little hole. And when I graduated, a lot of my people I went to school with were going anywhere but here. So positive progress is always commendable. Great job.
Yes. Well, and the board has done a great job. Prior to me getting here, they knew what was coming, and Ludi and the board worked together to kind of really cut back early on, and we've benefited from it. This is another creative way that Ludi brought to us that said, we can actually do better, and this is how we can do it. And so we're hoping that our citizens can see that. We're probably one of the largest employers, and we know where we need to invest our money, and our investment needs to be in our staff and our people. And so we're hoping that on November the 7th, people go and vote.
Anna, did you want to say something?
Yes, ma'am, I just wanted to say that after the hurricane, we kind of polled our teachers to see how many commuters that we had. We always knew it was a fairly significant number, and I haven't checked this week, but it was over 30% of our teachers that commute from Corpus Christi, Calallen. And so, of course, if they can get a job somewhere else, we want to make sure that we
Yep.
do what we can to entice them to stay.
I know, because every year we lose
Yes, ma'am.
quite a bit of teachers.
60's a big number.
Yeah, very good. Thank
Thank
y'all
you.
so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Okay. Agenda item number 5, consider and act upon a contract for election services between the Office of the Elections Administrator of Jim Wells County, Texas, and the City of Alice, and authorize the appropriate representative of the City of Alice to execute the agreement. Who's- or-
And Mayor, we just need to go ahead and close agenda item number 3. We opened the public hearing. And
I closed it.
you didn't.
She did. She said, I now close it.
And I apologize. That's what I had asked the city manager.
It's closed.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks.
Okay. Agenda item 5. This is the election contract that we've used in the past when we have used the Elections Administrator's Office from Jim Wells County. There is a copy of it in your packet. The contract is between ourselves and the Elections Office of Jim Wells County. It outlines all the responsibilities of the election office, the responsibilities of the city, and toward the back of your agreement, you will find several exhibits. Exhibit C is going to be the estimated cost for the election. This election cost will be shared in conjunction with the school district and also the state, which was helpful to us. In addition, you will see Exhibit A, which is early voting, when it begins and when it ends, and that was done back when we ordered the election, the dates and the times, beginning on Monday, October 23rd, ending on November the 3rd, with the two 12-hour days on November 1st and November 2nd. And Exhibit B are the precinct locations. What we are asking at this time is for council to allow the appropriate party to sign the documentation, acknowledge the joint election with the Alice Independent School District, and we can get this over to the election administrator so that we can start the next step of the process.
Council, any questions? Ms. Carrasco? No. Ms. Garza?
No.
Okay, Mr. Chris?
Just again, that's the total cost of 5220?
That is our share.
That is our
So
share,
that is
okay.
our share.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And it's an estimate, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Moran?
Yeah, I have a few questions. I guess I'll direct those to our city attorney. Mr. Lemon, so we've spelled out the process of the recall election. What I'd like to ask is the process once the election has occurred. And, for example, if both Ms. Garza and myself are recalled, what is the process that takes place after that?
Well, if you all are both recalled, then we're not going to have a quorum. And, you know, I could say there's a split of determination, but the Attorney General says that we're not going to have.
And I'm sorry, I'm
I'm sorry.
having trouble
and
hearing.
I apologize. The ultimate question is whether you all would remain seated or whether you all are immediately removed from office. And that generally, when we have an election in the state of Texas, if you are defeated in an election, you sit until, as per the Texas Constitution, you sit until the office is filled. In this particular situation, that you would be immediately removed as per the opinion of the Attorney General's office, and then we would not have a quorum. At that juncture, we would have to figure out a way to ask the governor, because we do not have a quorum to do an appropriate resolution, to ask for an emergency election. And then there is no specific timeline in those regards. And then the governor reviews it. If he feels there is an appropriate emergency, then he shall order an election. And, you know, times and dates are set at that juncture.
If he says no?
If he says no, then
What election date is that?
we got to figure it out. If he says no, then we go to May.
Okay.
So then the next election date would be May?
Yes, it would be in May. It was regularly scheduled elections. We either got to do it in November or in May.
Would there be a cost to the city for a May election? Would it be just the city, or it perhaps could be?
It just depends, and if there's another, like the school district's kind of bailing us out here, and then we have our state initiatives that allow us to offset the cost now, but there's no telling whether or not that would occur, or we'd have those opportunities in May.
So, Ms. Diane, what cost are we looking at for whether it's an emergency election or a May election?
During one of the budget hearings, I discussed with you, if our share here is the amount in there and it's being by 3, and going back and looking at prior elections, cost is normally about $20,000 and then shared across however many parties. That's what's appropriated in the budget right now, because those scenarios are unclear as to when it will occur, and whether there'll be any other entities sharing in that cost.
The other question is also, how will the ballots read, and who determines how those are read?
The ballots are drawn on language that is recommended by the Secretary of State. They have to be in both English and Spanish. They will be reviewed by legal and then are reviewed again by the election administrator before they, I'm sorry, was that toward you?
She's absolutely correct.
Before they are sent off for printing.
And how soon do we get to see a sample of that ballot?
The goal in speaking with Ms. Coleman this morning is to finish off the last changes we need here by tomorrow, get it to legal, and then once she gets approval and we're ready to move forward, we'll look at it. The ballot will include not only the city's portion, but it will include the state constitutional amendments as well as the Alice ISD provision.
I
One
apologize.
ballot.
I was listening to you, but I was also reading through my
okay.
notes that I took down.
That's okay.
Make sure I covered everything. I believe that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we're going to act upon the appropriate representative, which who do we?
I left it appropriate representative because in the contract, it has the mayor as executing it, and I'm unsure if it's the mayor or actually the city clerk. So that's why I put appropriate representative. And Mr. Lemon, I'm not sure.
Well, it would be the city, so it would be the mayor that goes in and execute it. Normally, the way it used to be, the city clerk ran our elections, and you are our election officer, but you can contract out. And so I don't believe the city clerk has the ability to contract on behalf of the city, so it would have to be the mayor.
Okay,
And this is drawn up for the mayor.
okay. Okay, so,
One other question, Mayor, if I may.
yes, ma'am.
And we are working with the county on this, and they are aware of these elections? We've made
Yes, ma'am.
communication with them?
Absolutely. The minute that the election was ordered, and even prior to, they were made aware.
It was
Yes, ma'am.
just trying to clarify some things that were brought up to me.
Okay, thank you. At this time, I'll entertain a motion on agenda item number 5.
I move that we accept agenda number 5 as presented.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Garza. I'll take a second.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor of agenda item number 5 as read, as stated?
Aye.
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 Okay, no opposed. Agenda item number 5 stands as stated, read. Okay. Is that clear, Mr. Lemon, or
No, that's sufficient. You did a very good job of introducing the item. If you introduce all phases of the agenda item, then you can accept it or move as presented.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 6, consider and act upon adopting a resolution authorizing the interim city manager to donate surplus firefighting equipment, supplies, and materials to the Texas Forest Service or to a successor agency authorized to cooperate in the development of rural fire protection plans to redistribute donation to rural volunteer fire departments impacted by Hurricane Harvey.
Chief Van Ness will be presenting on this
Thank you,
item.
Chief.
Mayor and council, as we continually go through our processes of checking our gear and making sure that they meet the requirements that we have to have, we always are moving stock out. These are protective gear that have been in storage for several years now in case we needed them, that had been previously used. And last time they were tested, they passed, but they don't have to be tested while they're in storage if they're never used again. But they have, Texas Commission on Fire Protection sets a 10-year mandate on how long we can keep protective gear for our staff. But doesn't say that we can't give it to volunteer agencies. So as we know, many agencies throughout Texas have been impacted by Hurricane Harvey. So again, this is another way that we have an opportunity to step up and try to help somebody who needs something in this time.
Very good. Council, any questions? Ms. Moran?
Just for Mr. Lemon. Mr. Lemon, is this an appropriate way to distribute city purchased property through taxpayer money?
Yes, ma'am, most definitely, and this is an issue that came up while I was on the council, but Article 3, Section 52I, I think, of your Texas Constitution specifically allows you to donate surplus equipment to rural or volunteer fire departments. And it has to be done through the Texas Forest Service, and there's a process that the chief well knows, and they're going through that right now.
Okay, very good.
And part of that process is, there's House Bill 460.
Well, that's what amended the Constitution back in 1997.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Which allowed cities to do this and took away the liability issue of doing that.
Right, because city
Because,
property,
because before that,
there are certain legalities
There were certain
that we have to
legalities.
follow when we're dealing with city
Right,
city
so-
property, the sale or.
right, so now we don't have to worry about that liability, and then also the Forest Service is exempt from that liability.
The other thing, Texas Forest Service, what do they do?
Texas A&M Forest Service,
Do they refurbish the equipment and then?
well,
What is
depends.
it that they're gonna do with it?
Okay, depends. If it's in good shape, they take it in, they inspect it, make sure it meets proper standards. If, like PPE, if it's in good shape, they take it and they redistribute it to an organization who needs it. If it's an air pack and it needs some repair work, they'll repair it and then they'll give it out. They also will take in trucks and redistribute trucks. And, you know, some cases, depending on the repairs, you know, that department may have to stick a little money into it, but on most cases, it's in a condition that they can put it to use pretty soon.
I have run across some research that I've done that there's other organizations, that's why I was asking about Texas Forest Service,
Yeah.
that actually do refurbish it and then turn around and sell it to other,
Right.
bring it back up to the legal standards and stuff. My question, Mr. Lemon, is does that absolve us of any future liability in the donation of the property?
Yes, Your Honor, or yes. Yes. I was in court this morning. Yes, ma'am, it does.
But thank you anyway.
Just as I'm a turn red, just as the chief said, it does, and that was the purpose of the statute back in
Okay.
the 90s.
Right.
Very good.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, council? Mr. Chris?
That was
No,
my
that was your
question,
question.
just the future liability of donating equipment that we haven't had certified in a while, so.
Right.
And then the idea of this is great because basically this is stuff that's just taking up storage space in our buildings to get it out from under us and help somebody in
sir.
need, so yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'll entertain a motion on agenda item number 6.
I make a motion that we consider and act upon adopting a resolution authorizing our interim city manager to donate the surplus firefighting equipment and supplies to the Texas Forest Service.
Okay, I'll
Real
Need a
quick,
second?
do we need to just alter that a little bit because you still make a motion to consider and act upon?
That's
ours?
how it reads.
No,
Well-
adopt.
But
a
we're
resolution.
just adopt it, right?
A resolution.
I just want to make sure that when we go through the minutes later on, we're good to go, so you know what I mean?
Consider and act
Because it is a
upon
resolution.
adopting a resolution.
So
Yes.
scratch, consider, and act.
Yes, and that's fine, but as long as generally you people understand what you're trying to say and it's
Okay.
evident we're
As long as
okay.
the
Then I
intent
second
is
it.
there.
But
Thank you, Mr. Chris.
You're correct.
Okay, we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
And no opposed? Okay. Motion stands as read. Agenda item, right here, we're going to recommend doing a little switcheroo because we have agenda item number 8, and we have our guest from TMRS.
Yes.
And so, being that number 7 might take a little bit more because that's going into workshop, we're going to go into agenda item number 8, review and discussion of proposed changes to the plan provisions of the retirement benefits to the City of Alice employees provided through Texas Municipal Retirement System, including but not limited to employer matching ratio, updated service credit, annuity increases, and contribution rates, and take any action necessary as a result of the discussions.
Mayor and council, this afternoon, we have Mr. Anthony Mills from TMRS, and he is going to walk you through the City of Alice plan provisions right now. And as he does that and walks through some retirement options, I'm going to be handing out to you all the proposed impact to our budget.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members of the council, I'm Anthony Mills, Senior Regional Manager with the Texas Municipal Retirement System. I know I speak for the entire staff at TMRS when I say it's a pleasure to be here today. As you enter into your budget talks. I understand that you would like a briefing of the TMRS program. What I'd like to do today is to give you a high-level overview first of how the plan works before we discuss anything about the funding side of it, so that if you do deliberate whether to make a change to the plan, that you would understand the impact of those changes. As we go along, feel free to interject, stop me along the way if it's something that you don't quite follow. I do know that this is not something that council members look at all year long, and it can be a bit difficult to understand from time to time. I deal with it all the time, so I may get off on a tangent that you're not quite following. I encourage you to stop me if you're not quite following it along the way. I would like to point out that the Texas Municipal Retirement System, we're one of 5 of the major statewide retirement systems. Most of the cities, towns, and villages throughout the state of Texas participate in our program. We have all different demographics. We have cities, at least 15 cities in the state of Texas, that has as few as 1 employee in that city that's working, but they do have a TMRS plan. Our largest city is the city just north of us, San Antonio, has over 6,000 active, non-uniformed members who participate in TMRS. We have over 870 some odd cities throughout the state that participate in our program. The city of Alice has been in TMRS since December of 1971. And in that almost 46-year history, what you have in place is a retirement plan that has assured employees who come here to work long enough, who will eventually qualify for a retirement benefit, is that they would have a well-funded lifetime retirement benefit when they do finally retire from the city. When I give you the high-level overview, I want to make sure that you understand just how they establish that eligibility and what the benefit actually looks like in little detail. I would go into as much detail as you would like, but I don't think that that's the real reason that we need to be here. But it is important that you understand that part of it as you discuss the funding side of it as well. In TMRS, all of our cities that have chosen to come into TMRS came in voluntarily. The TMRS Act is the section of state law that governs the program. Each of the cities that's in our program has agreed that they will use the provisions available under that TMRS Act to design the plan that makes most sense for that individual city. I would like to point out to you as council members that in TMRS, we don't tell you what your plan should look like. You tell us what that plan should look like. I will point out to you that the plan that you have here at the City of Alice has looked mostly the same for the last 18 years. That is, you've got a generation of retirees. Right now, you've got 146 members who have retired from the City of Alice, most of whom still reside within about 40 miles of City Hall. When I did a rough look at where the retirees live, most of them, over 65% of them, are still residing within 40 miles of City Hall. Most of them still right here in the City of Alice. You do have some who had commuted during their employment here with the city, but most of them still live relatively close to the city. But when the city designed its plan, as all cities do in TMRS, it really is a 3-pronged deal to build the income that pays the lifetime retirement benefit. The employees pay for a percentage of that benefit. The city pays for a percentage of that benefit. TMRS, we invest the dollars that the member and the city pays in, and it's the return from the investments at TMRS that ultimately end up funding about 2/3 of the retirement benefit itself when your members here from Alice finally do retire. You currently have 211 employees who are actively employed who could eventually qualify for a retirement benefit. When I did a rough look at that workforce, of the 211 active employees, those who work more than 1,000 hours a year, all of those employees have to participate in the system. Within the next 10 years, 160 of the 211 would establish eligibility for retirement benefit in TMRS. What I'd like for you to know is that TMRS, for each of the 875 cities in our program, each city has its own financials. Each city has its own assets, its own liabilities, its own funded ratio. That's the difference between those assets and liabilities. And importantly, in today's climate, today's environment, when hearing about retirement plans that are broken, I'd like to make sure that if nothing else that you take from our discussion today, that you know that the plan here with the City of Alice, that your plan is a well-funded plan. It is a well-funded plan, 89.2% funded, the difference between your assets and your liabilities. When you look at your total liabilities, it's about $42.3 million. When you look at the actual assets, the actuarial value of the assets you have on account with TMRS, $37.7 million, leaving a $4.5 million unfunded actuarial accrued liability. That liability, it's important to know that for those employees who are currently working and paying in and who will eventually retire, every cent that would eventually be paid out will ultimately be funded in TMRS. So when you hear about plans that are broken, one of the real characteristics that you'll see that those cities or those entities have in their retirement plans, one of the indicators of a non-healthy plan is that they don't have an amortization schedule in which they are going to fully fund that unfunded actuarial accrued liability. Each city in TMRS is on track to become a fully funded plan, and that includes the City of Alice. When you're looking at your members here at the city who will eventually qualify for a retirement benefit, the way that they go about building that retirement, you've got the plan set up so that employees pay in 5% of their pay on a pre-tax basis, and they earn interest on their accounts. And then the city is matching. The city can choose from a match that is a 1-to-1 match, a 1.5-to-1 match, or a 2-to-1 match. Since 1999, the city has had in place a 2-to-1 match. Since 1971, the city has had a 5% deposit rate for the employees, which is why I said for the last 18 years or so, your plan has looked basically the same. When an employee establishes eligibility here at Alice, there are two different ways to establish that eligibility. Age 60 and vested, that's 5 years of service in age 60. That's one way to establish eligibility. The other way to establish eligibility would be to get 20 years of service credit in the system and any age. That would qualify the member for retirement benefit, which is why when I mentioned to you earlier that of the 211 employees who currently work more than 1,000 hours a year here at the city, about 160 of them will establish eligibility within the next 10 years, within the next decade, before August of 2027. Of course, not all of them will continue working and retire from the city. Some will come and go as employees do, but many will continue to give service here to this community. And when they finally retire, what you will have done by paying a percentage of your payroll, that's the contribution rate that we're about to talk about, a percentage of your payroll that the city sends to TMRS monthly. That rate is determined for you on an annual basis. TMRS, we send you a rate letter, or we used to mail it to you. Now it's available online, and your staff pulls that letter and shares it with you and shows you the reconciliation that we do year to year to show you what your rate will be for the upcoming calendar year. That rate is a percentage of the payroll for those 211 covered employees. That percentage covers the match that the city makes into TMRS. When we look at the rate for the upcoming plan year, starting January 2018, that rate would be 9.34% if the city chooses to leave the plan as it is today. And some of you may look at it and say, but we are a 5% deposit plan for the employees, and we are a 2-to-1 match for the city, so why isn't the rate 10% or more? It's because it's an actuarially determined rate. It's an actuarially determined rate. And that means TMRS, we're always looking at the present value of future benefits for those 211 current employees and for the 146 who've actually retired. We're still looking at what has not yet been fully funded. And of that percentage of your payroll each year, we've got you fixed on a 25-year amortization schedule to ensure that you will have all the dollars on account for all the benefits that will ultimately be paid out in TMRS. Now, as I mentioned, each of the cities in TMRS gets to decide what its plan should look like, what is appropriate, what is sustainable. If the city of Alice is looking to make any type of plan change, understand that it's a dynamic plan. Any change you make in one place affects different pieces of the TMRS benefit. And I want to make sure that you understand a few of the optional provisions that you have in your plan so that when you consider making any type of plan change, you better understand how those plan changes would affect the current employees, future retirees, and those who are currently retired. In the packet that I brought for you today, you will find a page in there, My City Plan as of September 2017. It's a kind of aqua colored page with a Q&A. At a glance, you can see some of the very provisions that I've mentioned to you so far. If you'll look under the additional provisions, I want to mention a couple of them to you because I want to be sure that you understand that there's a cost for these provisions, and it may be that if the city is looking at making certain type of plan changes, I would certainly want you to make sure that you understand these provisions and the cost to the plan versus making a change to some of those primary provisions in your plan, like the match. The matching ratio, I'll just say this to you out front. When I look at your workforce, if the city is considering making some type of change to the matching ratio, anybody who's had a 2-to-1 match to date, and that's going to be most of your workforce because you've had a 2-to-1 match provision in place since 1999. Anyone who's had a 2-to-1 match, those liabilities are already on the books, and the city is continuing to fund those promised benefits at 2-to-1. If you would make some type of plan change, the effect would be going forward from that day forward to affect that match. Yes, there is some cost savings if you make that type of plan change, but more than anything, you ultimately, if you look long term, you end up shaving about a quarter to a third of the retirement benefit that would currently be projected for your workforce. Those employees that I mentioned would qualify within the next decade. About a quarter to a third of their retirement benefit would be reduced by making that type of plan change, when in fact there are other tools in the toolkit that may put the city, not just this council, but a future council in a position where they would still have discretion if they at some point needed to make some type of plan change because of a temporary budgetary issue. I would like to make sure that you understand that if the city is facing budget issues and you're looking for savings and your TMRS plan is a place that you're looking, there are a couple of other provisions. That includes the updated service credit provision and the annuity increase, the COLA provision, that may be a bigger bang for your buck and would not put a future council in the position where they may not be able to afford to get the city back to a 2-to-1 match once you found yourself in a better revenue position, if that is what's happening. Again, I'm here for information, not to suggest to you what is the best plan, but I do want to make sure that you have everything that's available to you in your toolkit to look at if you are considering making some type of plan change. Let me just describe for you the updated service credit provision and the annuity increase provision. I'd like to start with the annuity increase provision because it's easier to understand and easier for me to explain. For the 146 employees who are currently retired and of the 211 employees who will eventually retire, this provision is what we call the COLA provision, cost of living adjustment for retirees. It is directly tied to the change in the Consumer Price Index. We use the CPIU, Department of Labor Index, each year to figure out how much goods and services have increased in overall prices over the last calendar year. And then our cities get to adopt 70%, 50%, or 30% of that change. Those are the three options available. This city currently has the 70%, which is the highest percentage that you can change. In a typical year of inflation, let's say that it goes up 3%. Those retirees who've been retired for more than a full calendar year would see their annuity go up about 2.1%. That's the 70% times that 3% change, a 2.1% increase. Anybody who has followed the inflation index over the last several years know that we've been in a low inflation environment. That does not predict that we will continue to be in a low inflation environment. But one of the reasons that I'd like for you to at least look at the COLA provision is because we are in a low inflation environment. The current retirees, what they would see is that the city, if you reduce the provision to say 50% or 30%, you're not saying that there won't be any COLA going forward, but you are looking at a lower percentage of the change. That same example that I just gave you, a retiree who would see a 2.1% increase if inflation increased by 3%. If you reduce it to 50%, of course, that's going to be 50% times that 3%. That would be a 1.5% increase. If it's 30%, it would be a 0.9% increase for the same change in inflation. That's how the retirees would be affected. But the reason, and I want to make sure that you understand this completely, the reason that the COLA provision has such a cost to the city is that TMRS, we're giving you the liabilities not just for those folks who are currently retired, but we're also projecting the future liabilities for those 211 active employees who will retire. So that's part of your cost. So if we reduce that percentage, you're projecting the liabilities into the future to be substantially less. And that changes the cost to the city. And I brought in several projections so that you could see the dynamics of making that type of plan change. While the savings in reducing your match gets you to one place, if we looked out a generation, what I would say to a future council is if this council reduced the match, and let's say it's more than a decade before future council is in a position to say, you know, we want to get back to a 2-to-1 match, which is what most of our peer cities, those cities that you would consider your peer cities, I suspect they're towns like Pflugerville, Georgetown, who are close to a major metropolitan area, but not exactly there, but over 200 employees. If you get out more than a decade, that future council that may want to go back to 2-to-1, it may be cost prohibitive for them to get there if they're also looking to adopt the updated service credit provision, which would retroactively improve the retirement benefit for those employees who had been working, not getting the 2-to-1 match. So as I mentioned, since 1999, you've been at 2-to-1. If you change the match today, from this point forward, when people retire or come to work, those that you are recruiting to come to work here, you would tell them that they've got a 1-to-1 match or 1.5-to-1 match here at this city. One of the things, and this is not just anecdotal, one of the things that happens for our cities who are within striking range of other major TMRS cities, major metropolitan areas, which Corpus Christi is considered. You do the training for especially your public safety. Once you've got them credentialed, the better benefits plan generally wins out for that mid-career employee. They're going to either move to or be recruited from here or be hired at a city with an apple-to-apple comparison. They can see retirement, and that's usually where they end up when you're talking about just comparing benefits packages. And the reason that I would say consider, if you're looking at some type of change, the effect of the cost of living adjustment versus the match, that is a provision that a future council could do not on a repeating ordinance as you currently have it, but could do on a one-time 70% where you could fill in and make whole those years that employees have not been getting the full 70%, and then ratchet it back down to wherever you reduced it, whether it's 50% or 30%. But those tools would still be there in that toolkit without being so cost prohibitive for a future council. I wanted to make sure that you understood that. That's the COLA provision. The updated service credit provision is the other. It is not so easily understood, not even by people who deal with TMRS on a daily basis. So let me say that before I even start to discuss it. The updated service credit provision in TMRS, what it does is this. It is always looking at your workforce. And employees who either here at this city or who've come to work here from a different TMRS city, we're always looking at the plan design and the member's salary. If there's any major improvement in salary, at some point the formula for the updated service credit would retroactively go back and hypothetically suppose, what if this employee's salary had always looked this way? And what if the city's plan always looked as it does currently? And this updated service credit formula would then grant an additional cash credit to our members. The city shoulders a cost for that liability. And then that cash credit, along with the members' deposits and interest, the city's matching dollars, and the updated service credits, those are all added and ultimately divided to be part of that lifetime retirement benefit that we pay out. That's the simplified version of the updated service credit. But what you need to understand is it also has a retroactive feature in it. It has a retroactive feature. And it's always looking back. If you turned it off completely, it could be cost prohibitive for a city to put it back in place in the future. That's part of it. If you reduce it, it does not take off the table for future council to increase it or do a one-time increased updated service credit and then ratchet back the same way that I described in the COLA versus making that change to your matching ratio. I would like for you to look inside the packet that I brought for you. I believe you probably got duplicates. Your staff, I believe, also made the same items that I brought to you, but inside that, you're going to find the plan change study. I just want you to know these are only a few of the types of plan changes that this council or future council could make if it is something that the city is looking to do. The first column that you'll see is what we call the current plan design. And again, it's the plan change study. It's a horizontal page. You'll see 5 different proposed plan changes. And the staff has not told me that this is necessarily any plan that is looking to be adopted, but what I wanted to provide for you is for you to see the dynamics and how it affects your financials depending on the type of plan change that you make. You'll see that your current plan, it shows you some of what I've discussed today. In that first column, when you look down and look at the plan provisions and get down to your rate there in the middle of the page, that 9.34%, that's 9.34%. That's the percentage of your payroll, covered payroll, that you pay in 2018. If you do nothing to the plan, that's your rate for the upcoming year. And you'll notice that funded ratio I mentioned earlier, 89.2%. You're on an amortization schedule to fully fund that over a 25-year schedule. All right? When you look at the next 5 columns, those are proposed plan changes. You'll notice in column 1, we left the matching ratio as it is, but we did change the updated service credit to 50%. We changed the annuity increase, the COLA, to 50%. And you can see how it affects the dynamics. You'll notice that the rate goes down to 6.22%, that unfunded actuarial accrued liability from 4.5 to 1.4 million. When you continue looking at the plan change studies, Plan 2 shows you the 1.5 to 1 matching ratio, 50% updated service credit, 50% COLA. That rate is 4.17%, and your funded ratio is 98.2%. Let me just skip over. When you see that 1.5 to 1 and lowering the updated service credits, just to give you an idea, when I mentioned the bang for the buck, when you look at Plan 4, keeping the 2 to 1 match, but reducing the updated service credit to 50%, and the COLA to 30%. You see the rate goes to 4.73%, very close, 4.73%. But you'll notice that the unfunded actuarial accrued liability, you're overfunded by $388,000. Your funded ratio would be $101,000. And over a 25-year schedule, we want to wind you back down to 100%. There is a school of thought that would say that it's probably not a good position for the city to be in to have more money sitting on account with TMRS today than you're going to pay out in benefits, because that's what this does in that scenario. But it does do some of what I think the city is at least pondering, and that is finding some savings. And your staff has the actual budget numbers that they'd be able to share with you ultimately, but you see the percentage of the payroll and how that would affect you. And then just so that you could also see it, I went in Plan 5, reduced the updated service credit, not to 50%, but to 75%. Updated service credit can be adopted at 100%, 75%, and 50%. In this one, it's at 75, and the COLA is kept at 30. And you'll notice that one gets you to 100% funded ratio, and your unfunded actuarial accrued liability is $12,906. Just so that you can see just how dynamic it is, I wanted to put those out there for you to see. The point that I made earlier, I'd like to reiterate, and that is all 875 cities in TMRS on a path to be fully funded regardless of the plan design. That includes ALICE. Our plan, when you hear about plans in the news that are broken, that have problems, a decade or so ago, TMRS made the most substantive changes that we had made in our history since 1948. But it was those changes that we told our cities. It may be a bitter pill to swallow today. You had a former finance director. When we look back, finance director had been aggressively funding the TMRS plan, which is why your plan is in such good shape today. When you look at your funded ratio, that 89.2% funded. You've only got 10.8% to be fully funded over this 25-year schedule. All of our cities are in position to be fully funded, whether you make any plan changes or not. What undergirds our program is that they're all on track to be fully funded. You could make changes in the plan that would make you 100% funded today. But is that going to be the appropriate plan for the city of Alice? When you look at your workforce, when you look at the demands on public services here in the city of Alice, when you look at the credentialing that you have to do for your workforce, recruiting and retaining your workforce, when you look at what's appropriate for this city that's already for a generation have retired people at a 2-to-1 match and have most of the retirees still living and residing within a 40-mile radius of City Hall, what is an appropriate plan? I just wanted to make sure that you had the bulk of what you could look at, and I wanted to make sure that you understood that certain types of plan changes could have an impact that would affect not just this council in this budget cycle, but future councils in their decision-making and getting back to what the city probably would consider a more appropriate plan. And with that, I'll open it up for any questions that you've got.
Okay, council, Ms. Moran?
Thank you, Mr. Mills. You've done an outstanding job in presenting this to us and explaining the different proposals and scenarios. So I appreciate you coming down here to provide this for us. And we did request from Ms. Diane that we wanted a representative from TMRS here so that we could be informed, so that then we can make an informed decision. So we appreciate you coming down here.
My pleasure.
I think you've done a great job in explaining this. The charts speak for themselves that you've provided us with. And I don't really have
Thank you,
any
madam.
questions, just a
No
comment.
questions. Okay, Mr. Crisp?
Where do we begin? No, I'm just kidding. No, I guess the biggest thing to me is the updated service credit. You said that there's books written on it, it sounds like. But for the most part, what that actually does, can you give us like a small, a quick and dirty real-world scenario? Because I think I have a grasp on it, but I'd rather know that I have a grasp on it than think I have a grasp on it. So if
Okay.
you could, please.
Absolutely. The updated service credit, and the reason that I didn't go into the full detail of the formula is it can be very difficult to understand. You're right. But here's an example. I mentioned to you that all employees pay in a percentage of their pay on a pre-tax basis, and here at Alice it's 5%. And they're earning interest annually on that account balance. That's one of the cash balances that TMRS will ultimately use to convert to a lifetime retirement benefit. It's not the only one. The city's matching 2-to-1. All right. For most of the employees who've been here since 1999, they began getting that match at 2-to-1 in 1999. But we could go and find, and you probably know who your most senior employee is here. That employee has an updated service credit without me even looking at their account, and I'll tell you why. Because the updated service credit, as I mentioned, is always looking at the member's salary and looking at the plan design. In 1999, when this city improved the matching ratio to 2-to-1 and had the updated service credit in effect, any employee who had been working here before 1999 had not been getting a 2-to-1 match. So let's say that employee had been here since 1989. So for a decade, they had been getting a 1-to-1 match before the city improved to 2-to-1. So we have the actual reserves, that is the members' contributions and interest, the city's actual matching dollars. That's the total reserve, that balance. Let's just, for easy math, say that total balance is $100,000 for this employee. And let's just say that when you adopted the updated service credit and the 2-to-1 match in 1999, that employee had that $100,000 in total reserve. But now, when the updated service credit formula looks back, here's what it does. We take the highest 36 consecutive months of salary. We disregard the highest month and the lowest month to mitigate any type of pension spiking or maybe the anomalies where an employee gets a bonus payment and that's not representative of his monthly salary. So we drop that high month. We drop the lowest month because maybe you went on leave without pay, and that's not representative of his monthly salary either. Of those remaining 34 months, we call that the average salary. We will go back in this example that I'm using, back to 1989 and say, what if this employee's salary had been closer to what it is today? And what if he had paid in at 5% and got a 2-to-1 match instead of the actual 1-to-1 match that he did get? And what if those contributions had grown at 3% interest instead of the actual interest amounts, which is higher? What if they had grown at 3% per year? And in this example that I'm giving you, back in 1999, when you made this plan change to trigger an updated service credit for this employee, he had $100,000 in his total reserves. But when we bring that formula for updated service credit forward, it calculates to be $110,000. The difference between the actual reserve and that hypothetical reserve is $10,000. So if the city has 100% updated service credit adopted as the provision, he would get the full $10,000 credit. So now he's got $110,000 in reserves. If you had 75%, he'd get a $7,500 reserve credit. If you had 50%, he'd get a $5,000 credit. That is a real-life example of how an updated service credit could be triggered.
That $7,500 or $10,000 is paid for by the city.
The city, that's right. And what we've done is when we send you the liabilities as part of your rate, we've already projected based on the salary that's in the system, based on the plan design that you have in the system, based on what we know about the workforce and where it's projected over the next several years. We can project the future updated service credits, and we give you that liability to start advance funding. And that's why this piece of your plan, if you make a change, could affect your rate. Does that make sense, Councilman?
Now, you're looking at an employee then, okay, and that was an increase, okay? Now, what does it do to an employee now if we go from 100 to 50? That's been here for 10 years.
Okay. For many of the employees, it would have no effect. If an employee is getting a usual cost of living adjustment, maybe a 2% increase every year, every other year, maybe a merit payment, those are generally not going to trigger an updated service credit. Whether you kept it at 100% or reduced it to 50% or turned it off altogether.
Okay.
All right? But you will have, let's say you've got an employee who has gotten a major promotion within the last few years. Because of the formula that I mentioned where we take into account the highest 36 consecutive months, disregarding the most recent year, dropping the highest month and the lowest month, if you've got an employee who's been promoted and has gotten a significant pay increase, generally, and this is just a general, this is not anything exact, an 8 to 9% increase or more in salary, over time that's probably going to generate some type of updated service credit. All right? That employee, we had been projecting that they would get an updated service credit. If you reduce it, say to 50%, it's cut in half, whatever that future projection would be. If you were to, say, reduce the matching ratio, that changes the plan design, which even if an employee has gotten a major promotion, they're not going to get an updated service credit even if you kept it at 100%. I can't think of a scenario where they would. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Any other questions, Mr.
No,
President?
that's good for now.
Okay, Ms. Garza?
No.
Okay, Ms. Carrasco? No questions? Okay.
While we have Mr. Mills here, the handout that I passed out to you all is essentially taking his plan change study and converting it to budgetary impacts to our budget. You'll see current, and on the bottom, you will see currently in the general fund, the deficit, solid waste fund, and utility funds. That's what's hitting. You will see Plan 1, or Option 1, which is a 5% match, 2-to-1 ratio, 50% updated service credit, 50% annuity increase. Changing the total rate from 9.34 to 6.22, and you would have a reduction in your budget overall of $204,798. The second option is looking and taking into account a reduction to the matching ratio, 1.5 to 1, lowering the updated service credit to 50 and the annuity increase to 50, bringing your total rate to 4.17 and giving you a reduction in your budget of $339,358. Option 3 is on the next extreme level, which is a reduction in the match to 1-to-1, lowering the updated service credit to 50 and an annuity increase to 30, which brings your total rate down to 1.04 and would have the biggest budgetary impact. But like Mr. Mills was talking about, when you look at the excess that would be in the account, you would be overfunded by $1.7 million. Option 4 is keeping the match the same, lowering the updated service credit to 50, the annuity increase to 30, and having a rate of 4.73. You would be a little overfunded at 1.01% with an excess of about $388,000. The result to your budgetary impact would be $302,601. And the last option is keeping the rate at 2-to-1, the updated service credit at 75, the annuity increase at 30, bringing your total rate to 5.31. You would be 100% funded, and the impact to your budget would be $264,529. Underneath these reductions, you are going to see a table that talks about excess of revenues and expenditures with the budgetary impact for those scenarios. This is one of the last pieces of the puzzle that would need to be plugged into the budget. This would be what the actual balances, ending fund balances would be in your funds. So for example, under option 4, you would have a positive general fund balance at $1. And then as you move down, you'd see your solid waste, your utility, your golf course, your natatorium, and that consolidated fund balance of $572,372, that would be collectively in excess of all funds combined. Option 5, same scenario. I'm open to any questions. Please feel free to ask Mr. Mills anything. This is a big decision, but we can run other scenarios as well. Just open it up for discussion.
I'd like to ask a
Yes, ma'am.
question
Ms.
to
Carrasco?
Mr. Mills. Could you explain to me again on the unfunded actual liability?
The unfunded actuarial accrued liability is going to be the difference between the city's assets and liabilities. And to give you an idea of how TMRS, how we come up with your liabilities, we break it down into 3 different sections. And the very last page in the packet that I brought you, I wanted you to see this. I just ran this so that you can see. It's a calculation of contribution requirements, portrait print. And when you look at these side by side, under number 4, you'll see how we break these 3 different sections of your liabilities down. That's your contributing members. Those are your active employees. Your non-contributing members, those would be employees who once upon a time worked here at Alice, quit and have gone either to work at another TMRS city, or they were vested when they left but kept their accounts intact and have not yet retired. So they are still a liability. And then we've got your annuitants, those folks who've actually retired, who are receiving a retirement benefit, or those who are receiving a survivor benefit. Those three different sections, when we look at them, your total liability comes out to be about $42.3 million. But when we look at the assets that you currently have on account, the actuarial value of your assets, number 5, you'll notice that that's $37.7 million. So of those liabilities, you've got $37.7 on account with us. That's the actuarial value of your assets. So the difference between those two, that's your unfunded actuarial accrued liability, and then we put that on a 25-year schedule each year, and the monies that you pay into TMRS for the year, each year you're chopping down a portion of that unfunded to continue to move you toward 100%. And if you do the math on it, that would equal that 89.2% today. And then some of the projections that I included in your packet shows you how we are projecting the funded ratio to continue to track if the plan stayed as it is, or if you made some type of plan change.
Just getting very basic. Retirement rate. Define retirement rate and how it's determined.
Okay.
Very simply.
The contribution rate is the percentage of your payroll that the city contributes to TMRS annually.
Okay.
And that percentage holds steady because the city is required to send a monthly contribution to us. If it is 9.43% for the upcoming year, when we look at the 211 employees who work and pay in, that overall payroll, you'd send 9.43% of that payroll into TMRS. And that does everything that the city needs to do to meet its end of the funding for the plan.
Okay. Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Go ahead, sir.
No, go ahead. You go ahead first.
I was going to let council know that this is a big portion of the budget discussion and workshop.
Okay.
Ask all your questions now, and what I wanted to ask Mr. Lemon is, can we hold off on action to this item until we get to the workshop portion, and then have them make a decision on how they wish to proceed?
Can we revisit it?
They can, I mean, we're all doing it, it's all at the same meeting, so yes, they can pass on the agenda item and come back and revisit it, and then make a determination at that time, yes.
And TMRS, we can provide the model ordinance. If the city is going to make a change, we do have our ordinances that would need to actually be adopted.
And Mr. Mills, that would be done before the end of the year, correct?
Right,
And this would
that's
be
correct. It
effective
would need to be
January 1st.
done by December 31st.
And I just want to make a comment again, and this is more directed towards our employees who are here and those that aren't. You know, we are taking this very, very seriously, and this is one of the reasons why we asked for a representative from TMRS to be here, because again, like you said, the rumors have been out there about the city, given its current financial situation and having to address the deficit that existed prior to this council and what we are now looking at. Looking at the retirement was one of the options, but the matching wasn't just one of the options that we were going to look at. And Mr. Mills has come here to give us other options that are available without affecting the matching fund. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Mr. Mills?
That's correct.
So that's why we're asking to go into the workshop and look at this very carefully, because we would like to look at other options and not have to impact the retirement. So I'd like for the employees to understand that that's what we are really looking at.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Carrasco.
On, Mr. Mills, on the scenario number 4, on our current total rate is 9.34, and then if we do make some changes and it goes to that, and then our total rate is 4.73, what impact do we have as far as, it says 101, no, I'm sorry, I'm saying what impact would it have on the funding of future, of the employees that have retired?
Okay.
Were you?
For those who have already retired, and this goes back to the effect of these changes, how it's affecting. I described for Councilman Crisp the updated service credit and how an employee who is going to continue to get the usual cost of living adjustments or the occasional or the rare cost of living adjustment.
Say rare.
Any type of steady improvement in salary that's pretty standard, less than 8%, is probably not going to trigger an updated service credit, regardless of what the percentage is. All right? Somebody who has gotten a major promotion, though, let me be clear on this. Someone who has gotten a major promotion within the last few years could be adversely affected. Of course, this is prospectively. This is looking into the future. From here forward, that calculation would be less than it otherwise would have been if you go from 100% to 75 or 50%. That's how the active employees are affected by the updated service credit. The cost of living adjustment, and I needed to expand on this piece. I did mention to you that it's directly tied to the Consumer Price Index. It is. And I did mention to you that it's not just the current retirees, but it's also looking at the liabilities for the employees who are working and who will retire. Because we're giving you the cost for what we see their future COLAs to look like as well. So when you reduce the percentage, you're reducing it for both groups. You're reducing the liabilities. If that scenario that I had you look at, that last page that's in the packet, when you look at those side by side, you'll notice how the contributing member, the liability goes down from 21.4 million to 18.6. And you see how the non-contributing members, 2.5 to 2.3. And then for the annuitants, those who have already retired, you haven't fully funded all of their COLAs yet, 18.3 to 16.3. For this particular plan change design. That's just for your purposes to see the dynamics as an example. It changes those liabilities. And for the folks who are currently retired, this is what I did not mention when I talked about the COLA the first time, and it is important that I say this. For those folks who have been retired, because the COLA calculation has a retroactive benefit where it goes back to the first month that they've retired to look at what their annuity was. And for each year of inflation, you're making sure that they've gotten that 70% cost of living adjustment based on the change in the Consumer Price Index. If you reduce it to 50% or 30%, you've already been doing 70%, all right? So for someone who's been retired for a long time, they've been getting 70% of the change in inflation each year. Once you go to a lower percentage, we go back to year one, and we're supposing, did they get this 50% or 30%? The short answer is yes, because you had it at 70. They've already gotten that. So when we wind that all the way current, they're not due a cost of living adjustment until future years of inflation triggers a new COLA. So they would, I say all that to say this, there would be some years before they get another COLA. That's the net effect if you reduce that percentage. But then for the current active workforce, you've got an entire workforce that may have been, if they've been planning forward, considering that the city was going to grant cost of living adjustments when they retire, now they're having to plan for lower cost of living adjustment. It's not taking it away for them, but it would be lower. And that's the net effect on both the retirees and the workforce for a change in the COLA.
Something came up and now I'm
I,
trying to remember what it was.
I understand how that train travels.
Okay, if we lower it currently then, so let's say that we're at the 70 and we go to a different bracket. And then in the future, they decide to increase it, then you have to go, that's when you were saying you have
Yes.
to retro and recalculate.
That's
so that,
correct.
Okay.
That's correct. Thank you, Councilwoman Carrasco. If a future council decided, and this is one of the reasons I wanted to differentiate between reducing the match and reducing this provision, a future council could say, it's time to grant a cost of living adjustment at a higher percentage. And could, instead of adopting a new 70% on a repeating basis and ongoing, they could say, we're going to go 70%, but we're only going to do it for 1 year, and then next year we'll come back, we'll put the repeat back in place, but we're going to go back to where we were. So it would fill in those years where retirees from Alice did not get a cost of living adjustment at the 70% instead of the 50 or 30 that you've reduced it to here in 2017.
Thank you.
I have a question, if you all don't mind, for Mr. Mills. The funded ratio, when you're in excess of 100%, and you essentially have, I guess, is it a credit that the city would have that in future years, if they determined they needed to change something drastically, would those monies come into play?
It's an overage, and that overage, yes, it would be taken into account. Those are looked at as actual dollars.
Okay.
Except we can't give it back to the city. If you've got an overage, we just can only unwind you back down to 100% ratio.
And that's why it's obviously supposed to at least be 5, but on the scenario you presented, it's 4.7 or
right.
below because we're overfunded and
That's
we're coming
correct.
back down to
That's
0.
correct. That's exactly what's happening with that rate.
Okay. I have a question, but it's gonna take a statement to get there. Not gonna take. I'm gonna make one regardless. When we were presented the budget that Wednesday night, we needed 342 for taxes.
You have to back up. Which Wednesday night?
The
very
Wednesday
first
night that
night?
it was very
August 2nd.
initially presented.
Okay.
And, we asked a lot of questions in regards to retirement. At that point, we were presented a budget where the 342 was the tax increase. That was only the tax increase. That wasn't the full deficit or whatever it was. It was, nonetheless, that's the tax. That's what the tax would have generated. That's what I'm trying to say, is the
Okay.
342. At that point, we were presented a budget where where staff had did their job and worked the numbers excessively. And the low-hanging fruit, we asked a million questions about this, because the low-hanging fruit to get us back to the same dollar amount was this. Now, a point was brought up at one point, a statement was brought up at one point that said that you need to remember that these people, because I look out here and it's all employees, with the exception of Mr. Mills here, but are our constituents as well, right? And these are the same people that got hit with the 96% tax increase last year, that also took a 10% pay cut last year. Now, if we plan to dig further into their pockets, it's the same as digging further into every constituent's pocket, because in my eyes, these are the people, like it was said by Officer Sines, these employees make up Alice. So this is a last resort for us. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be presented with this, but it is a last resort. Now, staff has done an amazing job of reducing that deficit in the general fund. Obviously, the other ones are over, and we had a balanced budget when you presented it with that tax rate, and we needed to get back to it. But my question now is, I assume we'll see it in the next agenda item, is how does $300,000 get us to a $1 general fund overage when we were at $700,000?
Yeah, when we get to the budget
Yeah.
workshop,
Okay.
you'll be able to understand the further work that has been done, not only with just some cuts, but also adjusting of other revenues, of fees, looking back at sales tax and looking at projections from the comptroller. Yeah, we have it outlined for you all.
Well, I
And
just-
that's why I recommended it may be best before you take action here, that you see that and then determine where you all feel comfortable heading in that approach.
No, that's perfect. I just, you know, we come in with these ideas and then we haven't presented a new budget.
Right.
Well, I feel like some of us have some information that others don't, and that's fine. You do your extra homework and you get it, and because they ask questions that others don't, and that's fine. But I think that a lot of what we're seeing here is from the effort that even Mr. Atkinson talked about, where we presented line item by line item, talked about some additional
Yes.
fees, was mentioned by the mayor and some others that have made a big difference. But it's hard for us to have seen this first. Of course, we're taking into account our guest speaker here, and then consider an act. But you have
Right.
already said that we can revisit. So I just wanted to make that statement.
Good.
And I think, again, we have taken a collaborative effort at looking at other areas where we can address our deficit. But to totally understand, looking at the TMRS retirement system and the concerns of our employees, we needed to have Mr. Mills, the representative from TMRS, explain this to us so that we can make an informed decision. Again, with all the other collaborative efforts that we've taken throughout the weeks that we have spent addressing our budgets. Thank you very much, Mr. Mills.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Mr. Mills.
My pleasure.
Council, I think we're good, right? Thank you so much for your time and putting together all of this fabulous information.
Thank you.
Thank you.
that. Thank you so much.
Okay. So now,
You want to take a recess?
We can
you want to do a
break,
short
please. Yeah, we can-
recess? Okay.
sure.
We're going to take a short recess. The time is now 3:17, maybe a 5-minute recess. Be back in 5.
Sounds good.
Thank you.